Okay, I think we can get started today. And as you can see from the slide, today's lecture will be about intrusion detection. And you will find some similarities of intrusion detection and antivirus software. Some of the underlying ideas are quite similar, but they can be applied in different places. First, to hide this. Okay. Yeah. So the content of today's lecture will be like basically two parts. First, let's look at what is intrusion and like what are the behaviors and what are some examples of intrusion in a system. And only we have some idea of this intrusion.
No, the gifts come with a receipt. No, well, this one didn't.
She told you that she got them from us?
I'll mute all. If you have a question, then you can unmute yourself. And after we get some idea of this intrusion behavior, then we will move on to the next part. How can we develop some approaches and algorithms to detect some intrusion, to distinguish intrusion behavior against the normal behavior in the system. And that's the major content of today's lecture. And it's quite a general and high-level introduction. If we have still some time, then we can go through a short demo about it's not intrusion detection, it's more like integrity check tool, which is called the advanced intrusion detection environment. And if we have time, then we can go through this demo. I haven't played before the lecture, so if it fails, yeah, don't be surprised. Okay, let's look at the concept of intrusion. And in general, in cybersecurity or in cyberspace, as I mentioned in the very beginning of the lecture, what is cyberspace? It's quite difficult to give a very rigorous definition of cyberspace. But in general, you can consider it as systems or devices that connect to the internet, that related to cyber. All of these elements that connect to the internet, we can consider it's an asset of cyberspace. So there's a very significant security issue. It's about hostile, or at least unwanted trespass by users, like unauthorized logon or access to some system. This is unauthorized or unauthenticated. And also even for authorized users, authenticated users in a system, in some cases, some user may try to acquire extra privilege permission rights to take further action beyond its authorized right. And most of this we can consider like one type of intrusion by users. And another quite typical intrusion is conducted by software. That's what we have learned from last chapters, all the content of malware. So in general, it's unauthorized actions by malicious software. And in the textbook, it's better to use use this. Okay, oh, it's connected. So in the textbook, you will find this general definition about security intrusion. It's just a general concept of unauthorized actions that try to bypass security mechanisms in a system. That's the idea or the concept of intrusion. And all these intrusion activities or behavior are contacted by either users or software. And when it is related to users, we call it the intruders. And intruders, there are a range of different categories of intruders. In the textbook, you in the very beginning, you will see this general classification of different type of intruders based on their motivation, based on their competence. And in general, you can consider, okay, intruders are hackers. These hackers could cyber criminals or could activists that motivated by some political reason, like Edward Snowden. And there's other quite strong, quite a big category of intruders. That's state-sponsored criminal activity or criminal intruders. So here we can say it's a criminal enterprise, and there's others. It's a very weak classification. And these intruders, they have varying levels of technical skills and competence when it comes to the technical background of these intruders. So let's take some example of these intruders. So first, let's look at hackers. So most of the hackers, especially in the early days, they are motivated by the threat of access or status among the community, mostly technical community. So they want to kind of, by hacking community, a strong meritocracy or some quite well-reputed system to show their competence. And also if the task or the attack itself is rather technically demanding, then they get higher reputation in the community. So this is in the early days, their motivation of many technical IT geeks. And these intruders, they can range from benign intruders and very severe or catastrophic intruders. And if just for the benign intruders, normally they will take some resource of the system and will slow down the performance of the system. But in the beginning, or in most of the cases, if it's not very serious, it's tolerable by the system. Of course, it will take up some resource of the system, but normally you can still operate on the system, which give you the normal operation. And for some advanced intruders, and they can cause a rather catastrophic consequence to the system, like delete some important files or modify some of the process, or even cause the disruption to the system. And there are some countermeasures against this type of intruders, like intrusion detection system that we will discuss today, and also intrusion prevention system. That's termed as if some intrusion is detected, then shall we do with it? And shall we delete some of this infected software, or shall we try to close down, or how to recover from the original system? So this part is, they categorize it as intrusion prevention system. And also for VPNs, that stands for virtual private network. That's to prevent intruders from very beginning. Here, prevent hackers to sniff on the network traffic from very beginning, because the traffic in the private virtual private network will be encrypted, and we will learn this later on. But these general countermeasures will help to prevent the intrusion by hackers. And also because of, although these hackers, mostly they are individuals, but they cause some problems, at least noise to the system, to the community. And awareness of this kind of hacking activities led to establishment of what is called the SET. It's a Computer Emergency Report, T, I didn't remember T, what it stands for. So in many countries. And basically these organizations is responsible for collecting and disseminating vulnerabilities and responses to those vulnerabilities in many systems. So let's look at some behavior by hackers. In general, like there are several types of examples. In the very beginning, most of the hackers will try to select target systems to hack into by using IP lookup tables. This IP here, it's the identifier of computers in the network. And they will use some tools, mostly like Nmap or network map standing for. That's what the Nmap stands for. And it's a map network for accessible services. So some of these hackers, they just try to explore in the internet and use some tools to scan the devices in the network, and then try to find whether there's some services they want to use, but they have to pay for it, for example, or at least they don't have legitimate access to some of these services. And some of these attackers, they will try to find some vulnerabilities in those services they are interested in. And if they don't have access, if they need some password, then they may try to use some password cracking tools. Like in Mandatory Assignment 2, you may try this Join Reaper or Hashcat. These are the two commonly used password cracking tools. And if the password is not strong enough, well, there's a good chance, at least among many systems, there's a good chance that these two tools can crack the password successfully. And after, if this step succeeds, then the hackers will try to install remote administration tools in the system and wait for administrators, sometimes by mistake, to log on and capture the password. This kind of in parallel with this brute force or guess password. There are different ways to try to get password. Like if the password is quite strong and cannot be cracked by these two tools or other cracking tools, then they may try to, wait for the administrator to log on sometimes to the system. And if the machine was already infected by like keyloggers or some other keyloggers, excuse me, or some other malware, then in some cases, the password could be sniffed. And in this case, and they can use, the hackers can use the password to access the network with administration right or the root permission right. So these are the kind of the behaviors of hackers. And the second type is this criminal enterprise. They are not as easy to prevent as individual hackers, because normally they are organized in groups of hackers, and they could be some corporations try to hack their opponents in the or competitors in the market, or there could be some governments. I think that's quite obvious. Different governments, they have dedicated team or agency to attack others and defend themselves. And there are some other types of this enterprise. They are loosely affiliated to specific organizations. They may be virtually gathered together and to conduct some attack. After that, then they just they disappear. And for most of these criminal enterprise, it will cause more serious consequences than individual hackers. And these hacking activities are mostly motivated by financial incentives or political purpose. So in general, they will mostly target credit card information on e-commerce server. So you will see, you might have already seen many news headlines mention, some companies, they have their customers' ID information or even credit card information released to the public, or they are hacked. And then this company, they have to notify their customers to change their password for their account information, or they may have some further steps in accordance with this type of attacks. And for this criminal enterprise, because they are more motivated by some incentives in terms of political or financial, so they mostly have specific targets. It's not like they are targeting individual persons like us, because we don't have much incentives to them. And so they may target to some big companies, especially some banks, or maybe some stock marketing companies. And for this type of criminal activities, or the intrusion detection or intrusion prevention could help, but its function is limited. And to make it more effective, mostly it's advisable to encrypt sensitive data in database. That's quite normal. I see a question, a network reminder. I don't get this question. We can. So let's look at the behavior examples of this criminal enterprise. Because they are groups of hackers, and they are mostly well coordinated. And they act very quickly and very precisely to achieve their goal, to conduct the hacking activities, and to make the activities harder to detect. And because mostly they are they have the actions in the internet, so they try to exploit the parameters via vulnerable ports. Here, the vulnerable ports we will learn in next week in the internet. That's for the system. Then most of systems, they accept the incoming traffic. And this incoming traffic will be sent via these ports to the applications in that system. If this port is closed, then basically the door to the application is closed. Then low incoming traffic will affect the either the system or the applications. But for some of the systems, they haven't closed some ports that are open, but they shouldn't be open. So that's the idea of these vulnerable ports. And they might use some Trojan horses to leave backdoors for re-entry when for the next time subsequent attacks. And as I mentioned, they may use some sniffers to capture password. And because they have very clear goal, it's different from hackers, because some hackers, they may just want to show off, and then they want to stay, or they want to keep their intrusion behavior longer so that others can see it, so that they can get some status in the community. But for criminal enterprise, they have very specified goal, very clear goal. After they achieve their goal, they will disappear. They will just leave. So they won't stick around normally. And because they are coordinated and they are supported by organizations, governments, so in general, they make very few mistakes and they leave very little tracks in the system. And it also makes the detection very difficult. I see some question. Let's check this question. Yes, thanks, Hegner. That's the intention. That's the meaning of this. I think it's this one. Which is it? Okay, here, yes. Here it's just some examples. If the hacker is able to get administration password, or then there could be some subnets or some other devices connect to the network, then they may use this password to access the remainder of the network. It could include some computers, or it could include servers and maybe a sub-network in the network. Since we haven't learned the network, then I will skip some of this discussion about network, and we will come back to discussions about network later on. And with the development of intrusions, like back to 1980s or even 1970s, in the very beginning, the intrusion behavior is mostly try to steal some information or to cause some noise in the system, and to access some files that is not unauthorized in the beginning. That's the kind of the conventional purpose or activities of intrusion. But now, they have more advanced tools, and they are more targeting to exploit newly discovered weakness. Because most of these vulnerabilities and weaknesses in an operating system or in an application, they would be patched quite shortly, hopefully, and like in very short time period, then some of this vulnerability will be patched. Then, of course, it takes time, takes resource, takes money to develop some tools to exploit the existing vulnerabilities. And from attacker's point of view, it will be much better to explore some new exploits, new vulnerabilities that haven't been patched in the system. So you see the time gap between, okay, the vulnerabilities is released, is found, and this vulnerability is patched. Mostly this time period is not long, but if this vulnerability is found by hackers, then the situation will be very difficult for the system administrator. If these vulnerabilities are found by like penetrators or some white hackers, they are employed or they have some connection with the organization, then they can kind of silently patch the vulnerabilities. And then after they patch, they will have this announcement, okay, there's vulnerabilities in the system and it has been patched. And for intrusions, nowadays, they try to exploit this newly discovered weakness. And also, they try to invade the intrusion detection and the new countermeasures. So I mentioned several times, like these are two sides. We can say black and white side. So the black side, they try to hack the system. The white side try to protect the system. But there's an arm race between two sides. If some advanced technology is deployed by one side, the other side will try to catch up, to find some new measures against these newly founded technologies. And for intrusion, in the textbook, they try to, although different intrusions, they have different activity and the behaviors, but in general, they share some common behaviors or common faces. And in the textbook, they also cited a research paper about the general faces of intrusion activities. So the starting phase of an intrusion is try to acquire a target system or target network, and then try to gather information about the targets with the publicly available information or with some other information that can be obtained by social engineering techniques, or even, okay, pretend to be a journalist and call the CEO of the organization, then ask them, okay, we want to have an interview with you, and then we would like to introduce your company. Like maybe then during this interview, they can ask some questions, and they hope the answers will give them extra information that they cannot obtain from public available information of the company or an organization. And then it comes to this initial access. Yeah, I have a question. I should have been seeing oncoming. I didn't see it clearly. So I will look at the questions later on during the break. And then hopefully this intrusion or intruders can get the initial access to the target system. And mostly these system administrators or security experts, of course, they are more conservative and they are more careful. So it's not that easy to get the root password or administration password of a system. And if some users or some employees in the system lost their password and fall in the hand of the intruders, then they will try if there is some way they can lift their privilege rights in the system. And after that, mostly the intrusion will try to steal information or exploit vulnerabilities in the system. And for most of the intrusions, they want to keep their target still in hand. So even they have already stolen the information they need, but it's not expensive to keep it. So then some of them, they will try to leave some backdoor for the future access remotely. And the last step is this covering tracks. That's quite tricky and advanced. If the intruders managed to install rootkit in the target system, this rootkit, it has much more privileged permission rights in the system. Then they can, because in all the operating system, they will log all the events, activities, and of the files or process in the system, and they will store all this information, this log file, in a specific location. Then if the rootkit is controlled by an intruder, then they will try to use the rootkit to delete this information and to make it kind of quite clean. And that's the last step of intrusion. It's quite typical. Let's look at these phases one by one and to see the behavior examples of different phases. So the first one is target acquisition and information gathering. And one example is the attacker tried to explore corporate websites. Here, suppose the target is a website. And for information on the corporate structure, personnel, key systems, as well as the details of specific web server and the operating system used. So this step is kind of to gather, to connect all the information that is relevant to the target system. And then mostly they are connected to the network. They also try to get information on the target network using the DNS lookup tool. Here, this DNS stands for domain name system. And that's a part of a network we will introduce later. And then use this DNS tool, they will get more information and also some database of the system. Some of the organizations, they have this information public available. Some of them, it's not public available, but it can be scannable by some tools. And then use, it's quite similar as we already introduced, map the network for accessible services using tools like the Nmap. We will also use this tool later on. It's built in Kali Linux. And there's some other types of this intrusion behavior. Try to send a query email to the customer service contact and review response for the information on the mail client server and operating system, and also to get the details of persons responding. So it's like combination of the social engineering techniques and like the phishing email. And in the here, the last step is to identify potentially vulnerable services. For example, vulnerable web, this content managed system, that's a CMS. For the initial access, like take example from the previous web CMS, then try to brute force the user's password at that web exploit vulnerability in the web CMS plugin to gain system access. And if it's not rather successful, then try to use some other tools to send spear phishing email to specific touched personnel in the organization, especially some people in high position of the websites of the organization. So that's why in the beginning, they will try to get all the possible information of their target. And they will try different ways. And their goal is to get more information, more sensitive information from personnel in that organization. And then is this privilege escalation. So in this case, if they get some access to the network, to the touched system, but the permission right is not very high, not very powerful, they will try to lift the privilege permission in the system. So scan system for applications with local exploit any vulnerable application to gain evaluated privilege. And again, install sniffers and use a captured administrator password to access. Then with these kind of preparation steps, then their major goal, suppose they want to steal some information or to exploit the system vulnerabilities, then with some privilege rights, they would be able to scan files in the system, especially the content of the files, to look for the sensitive information they are interested in. Especially not like personal computers. If you think of this system as a database of customer information of a company, then that's more serious. Then transfer large numbers of documents to external repositories. That's a kind of the information stealing process. And if it succeeds, basically, that's also another reason we mentioned when we set password, we should avoid to use the same password in different systems. It's valid for personal users. It's valid for administrators as well. So in many cases, if the password can be hacked in one system, if this user of the password is administrator of other network, other servers, well, it's rather likely the same password could be related to the new password. Then they can use dictionary password tags or some other combined tools to reduce the cracking complexity of the new password. Right. And then maintaining access, mostly they will try to install what is so-called the remote Trojan or remote access tools, or in the worst case, to install rootkit in the system. Then they have the password to access the network. And also, if the rootkit is unfortunately installed in the system, then they can fool the IDS programs by clearing the log files, or they can deactivate the antivirus software in the system. So the last one is covering tracks, as I mentioned. So to use rootkit to hide files installed in the system, edit log files to remove entries generated during the intrusion. So these are the, to give you the idea what the intrusion activities look like and what an intruder can do in a system, or what are the general steps or procedure the intruder hacking to the system. You can think of if you have a good hacking tools or the good attack kits that normally if it's bought from the dark market, then there's a lot of tools can use. Okay, let's look at the second part, intrusion detection system. I noticed we only have 3 minutes. Before we continue, do we have any question? Or like this very high level introduction, does it make sense to you? Yeah. And I think we can have 15-minute break, and I will look at the questions online, and then we can continue. Yeah, the second part. Okay, let's continue. So now we can move on to the second part, intrusion detection system. First, let's kind of go through the motivations of intrusion detection system. And an unfortunate reality is we cannot prevent all break-ins. We cannot prevent all intrusions. And then what we can do, because there's always new hosts, new attacks, and new attackers, what we need some way to cope with this situation. And we have mentioned one of the important strategies of cybersecurity is to have multi-level defense or defense in depth. So if one defense does not work, then we still have some other to back up or to complement the difference. So mostly we have learned like cryptography, access control. They are all like one type of countermeasures against a certain type of intrusion here. And if one single defense failed, then we need some other countermeasures to back up. And this intrusion detection is one such layer. And hopefully, if we can block it quickly when it is detected, that's good. And also, this type of intrusion detection can be considered as a type of deterrent. Because if the intrusion or the attackers know that if they attack some system, they might be tracked. First, their behavior will be detected and they might be tracked. Then they will reconsider this, hopefully, the attacking behaviors. And so it can be serving as a type of deterrent. And also the use of intrusion detection when it detects some vulnerabilities, some intrusion, and then the administrators or experts will analyze the whole process of some intrusion behaviors and activities. And then they will notice, okay, there are some essential steps that make these intrusion activities possible and successful. Then they will dig into what are the vulnerabilities in the system that lead to this type of intrusion activities. So it can help the system administrators to improve the security of the system itself. That's a motivation of having intrusion detection. And what is the general concept of intrusion detection? Well, you can consider it as the hardware or software function that gathers and analyzes information from various areas within a computer system or within a network to identify possible security intrusions, to identify possible unauthorized action or bypassing in the system. And for this type of intrusion to make it work, in fact, we need some basic assumptions. It could be overlooked that, okay, I use the intrusion detection system to protect a system. But in general, first, the system activities can be observable by some software or even by experts. And normal behaviors and the intrusion behavior in a system can be distinguished. That's important. If the tool or the expert cannot distinguish what are the normal behavior in a system, what are the intrusion behaviors in a system, then how can we design an intrusion detection system? How can we come up with some approach for this system, right? And also to make it automated, to make it involve less human activities or like manual investigation, then it's preferable that most of this intrusion behavior or normal behavior could be parameterized and could be characterized in a quantitative way. Give some quantity to some behavior, and then with some tools, they like either count some of the times or for each behavior, they try to associate some parameters to the behavior. And if the parameters, like in one example, it exceed the threshold value of its normal behavior, then it can be considered, okay, that behavior is intrusion behavior. At least it's quite probable. The likelihood is high that some intrusion behavior with the parameters beyond some threshold. That's the idea. But in general, this is to make the tool more automated because we don't want to involve so many human resources to detect intrusions in system, right? And with these assumptions, then let's look at what are the components of an intrusion detection system, shortly IDS. First, the sensor component. And this component is responsible for collecting data in the system or in a network. And the data input type includes like the network packets, or like we can say in general, network traffic, or log files or log records in a computer system. And also sometimes the system call traces. In each operating system, it has the fixed system call command, and the history of all these system call in a time period. This can be used as the input data to the intrusion detection system. And with these data samples, and this another component of an IDS, the analyzers. This component is responsible for determining whether it's a intrusion behavior or whether some intrusion has occurred based on the information from the sensors. So this kind of, you can consider it as a program or tool, you have the input, and based on some operations, some models implemented in this tool, then it gives you output. And this output is generally an indicator whether the behavior in question, the behavior investigated, is intrusion behavior or is a normal behavior. So to give you the output. And in general also, of course, it should be user-friendly. Then it should provide a rather friendly user interface for users to operate on this process. So it's a rather general components of each IDS. And for these components, for previously, we look at these components basically from the functional perspective. What are the functions of that components? Whether it is used to gathering data or whether it is used to analyze data. And if we look at the components from the algorithmic perspective, then first, these features, like we look at the features of some behavior, and this algorithm or the tools, they try to capture intrusion evidence from the audit data. So it's like within the analyzers of the IDS. And also the model, the general model is if from the first of these features of the behavior, they can get some information that it could be a intrusion behavior, then this model is to piece all this evidence together from different resource, from different output of the analyzer, and then in the end to come to a conclusion whether the behavior in question is an intrusion behavior or is a normal behavior. So these are the general model of the IDS, or like we can say architecture. So here, as I mentioned in the very beginning, that there's the data connection process or data gathering process to gathering different type of data to use it as input in the IDS. And most of this data, they're stored in different systems, stored in different operating systems. And they are application specific or operating specific. So they are not necessarily in a standard format to be analyzed. So here you, in most of the IDS, so it has this preprocessor, this component to standardize the data format to get the parameters of the input data. Then it has this also sometimes to fill out unrelated data in this process and only give out the security related log file or the data, and then to send it to the next component. It's this detection engine. This detection engine, it's based on some detection models, and we will look at these models a bit more in a bit more detail, but not so much in fact. And with this detection model and with this input data that's already in the standardized format, then this detection engine will give out a kind of alarm. And this alarm is not necessarily lead to the final result, but kind of, okay, some of this behavior, some of the data seems to be suspicious. And then what shall we do next? And in an IDS, normally they have this decision engine. So for these alarms, and they will have another this decision model for different models. These models, some of them, they are based on some statistic model. Some of them are based on human or expertise to make a decision, okay, some of this behavior seems to be suspicious, then we have to make a decision which of them are really intrusion behaviors. Then in the end, they have the output of this decision engine gives out a report or action. Well, if it's just a report, then we consider it's an IDS. If it takes further action on the behaviors, then they are mostly considered as intrusion prevention system. So these are like these are traffic lights, whether it's good or bad in the end, whether it's intrusion behavior or whether it's normal behavior, then it's like related to this report. That's the general architecture or model of most of intrusion detection systems. And again, most of intrusion detection systems are quite complex, and we always need to classify them to be able to learn them better. And there are two types of classification. One classification is based on the information source and the data type, whether the data from the sensor component they are from a single system or whether it's a network traffic data. So based on this, it has three types of intrusion detection system: host-based or network-based or hybrid. And for the host-based, in mostly like the intrusion detection system monitor the characteristic of a single host or system, and also all the events, all the log files within that single system. But mostly a company, they will maintain different servers, different computers in their network. So it's quite tedious. Of course, it can do like they install this type of intrusion detection system in all individual systems, and then to run this intrusion detection system separately at different systems. But there would be some information missed if just this type of operation or protection. And another type is this network-based IDS. So they try to get some network traffic, network information in its network. So it placed in some node in the network. A better or more accurate report is mostly from this hybrid intrusion detection system. So this type of intrusion detection system, they combine all the information from individual hosts, like from the host intrusion detection system in each individual systems, and combine the network traffic. So all this information is sent to mostly a centralized analyzer, and then it will give out the analysis result on all the input data. So this idea of this classification, and also based on the detection approach of many intrusion detection systems, then there are two types of approach. One is this anomaly detection. The other one is a signature or heuristic detection. These two types of approaches. Let's look at, I will skip this requirement of an intrusion detection system. It's directly copied from the textbook. But it's kind of the ideal situation. If we want to design an intrusion detection system, what are the ultimate goal of the design? And of course, this intrusion detection system should be robust, should be flexible, should introduce a very little overhead, should be transparent to the end users, and a list of requirements on it. But in general, these requirements are quite difficult to, in fact, are quite difficult to meet at the same time, at least. Let's look at the intrusion detection approach. In previous slide, we have seen there are two types of this detection. The first one is anomaly detection. The idea is in the system, you have gathered all this data, and we have the assumption that it's possible to observe all the data. It's possible to distinguish normal behavior and intrusion behavior, right? Then for this anomaly detection, they try to formulate all the normal behaviors in the system and use these normal behaviors stored in a database and use it as a reference. So for the next time, when the system is scanned and some behavior is examined, then if the behavior of the current examining the behavior is quite different from normal behaviors, then it can trigger some alarm that this behavior, this current behavior could be an intrusion. That's the essential idea of anomaly detection. And the other one is this signature or heuristic detection. That's the other side. So to formulate all the malicious intrusion behaviors, like from malware, it's like previously we have this virus, worms, all these behaviors, all these patterns, and they try to create a database of this. And if later on the system is examined, and some behavior, if it has many patterns, many behaviors or structures that are quite similar as someone in the database, then this could be quite suspicious, and the alarm will be triggered for further investigation. So let's look at the statistical approach. This anomaly detection, in the textbook, they mentioned 3 types of approach. The first one is a statistical approach, which is widely used. And the second one is knowledge-based detection. The third one is machine learning detection. And the machine learning detection is kind of a new trend. It's a research direction. So we won't go into that one. And for the statistical approach, it's relatively mature. So we will mostly discuss this approach. In this approach, so when the data is gathered, then it will input this pre-processing data process, that component in the previous model. And all this data will be first standardized in a formal way that can be readable, can be analyzable for the components. And also each of these data will be parameterized according to some metrics, standard metrics. This metric information could, let me see whether it's, I think it's in the next slide. I will, we can wait a little bit. And with this standard metrics that's predefined in the system, and each of these data will get some value or quantity. And most of this approach, they have this threshold-based model. This threshold like lists, okay, for each behavior, what are the value is normal. Then if some of this, the behavior has some values that beyond this threshold, then it's suspicious. And there are several models for this threshold-based. Basically, they will count occurrence of the specific event over time. Like if that event is investigated, if it exceeds reasonable value that pre-assumed, then it's assumed to be an intrusion behavior. In most of these cases, they use a univariate model. Like that's like in the beginning. So for each of these events, they are assigned with one single parameter, like one single value of it. And it's not comprehensive. So it in the beginning, it's not very effective neither. Then later on, researchers come up with what about we try to get more parameters or more values, more dimensions of some behavior, and it's that is called profile-based. In this case, multivariate model is introduced, and also the time series, that's a quite major statistical model, is applied. Basically, it characterizes the past behavior of users in a time period, maybe last 3 months, last 6 months, or last 2 years. And when the system is currently examined, then it will compare the current behavior against the history of a specific user or specific events. And if there's an obvious deviation from previous events or previous behavior, then it kind of gives some information, okay, maybe an indicator that's suspicious, or maybe that's already an intrusion behavior. And in this type of approach, they use mostly the audit record analysis or the log record in a system. It's a foundation of a statistical approach. And here I list here like to analyze this record, they need some metrics. These metrics are defined by experts. Like what could be important metrics to associate to the data or to some of this log file, and like how many times it visits some files, also like this interval timer, and also resource use. What are the resources used by some system call in normal case, or if a normal user, when it access some other applications or some other resources, what are the range of the resource, what are the amount of this resource is being used from the past. And they will set some values or quantity on this metric. If suddenly, like some of this metric is increased a lot, then it's suspicious. And this, based on this information, they use a different model to test, to evaluate these metrics. Like basically, there's some basic statistic model, like the mean of some metrics, a standard deviation, or in some cases, macro process, or some other operational models. There are many models of it. And for this type of analysis, it has advantages and disadvantages. In fact, for all the approaches, they have their own advantages and disadvantages. So for the statistical approach, the advantages, it's rather simple, because if the metrics is already defined from very beginning, and if some statistical models are already implemented in the system, then they just, okay, try to gather data and then go through this process. It's relatively simple than other approaches. And also, most of this statistical model, it's try to distinguish the normal behavior and abnormal behavior. So it uses a very simple statistic analysis. So it's in general, it's a computational cost is rather low. And also, there's no need to assume some type of behavior in this model, but it has a disadvantage. As you can imagine, or you can guess, how to choose suitable metrics. That's quite challenging in many systems. When the system becomes rather complex, and also the source of the data, it varies, then how to properly define these metrics, that is suitable. And how to set this threshold value. What is normal value? What is intrusion? The value for intrusion? How to keep the balance? It's not easy. I remember I attended a security talk about the denial of service, and the very beginning in the slide, the speakers mentioned, okay, some developers, some administrators, when they get a lot of new traffics in the system or in the IDS, they got confused. They are not sure whether it's an attack, like denial of service attack, or whether it's just, okay, their company, their organization is suddenly very popular, and they got many new incoming traffic. So these are the disadvantages of this type of the detection. The second type of approach is signature or heuristic detection. The general idea, as I mentioned, they try to formulate abnormal, like malicious behavior. And so they observe events in the system and applying either a set of signature patterns or structure of the data, or a set of rules, try to characterize which are the intrusion behavior, which are normal behavior. So here, this approach, it matches a large connection of low-end patterns of malicious data or malicious software. And again, this type of signature-based approach, it's quite similar as the antivirus software. They try to create the signatures of all the malicious software and use it as database, as a reference for later examination of some software. The disadvantages, it's a continuous process. So it requires the developer of IDS to identify and review new malware. And also it cannot detect zero-day attacks or zero-day exploits. We mentioned if there's a time gap for some of these newly developed, newly discovered exploits or vulnerability, then if it's not added to the database, then it means it cannot detect this type of vulnerability. And another type of this approach is this rule-based heuristic detection. And the identification involves the use of rules for identifying low-end penetrations or penetration that would exploit low-end weakness. What it means. So first, they will observe events in the system, and they have preset rules. They apply those rules to decide if the activity is suspicious or not. And of course, these rules, it can be used for the normal behaviors. It can be also used for the malicious behaviors. So for this anomaly detection, so it analyzes the historic audit records to identify some normal behavior and use this usage pattern, auto-generate rules for them. I think I can skip. For this type of rule, they automatically kind of set some rules to behavior, and so there's no need to require prior knowledge of the security flaws. Then we have the next step, this rule-based penetration identifications. It uses expert system technology. And so with some rules, they try to identify low-end penetrations. This penetration is another, to me, it's another word to intrusion. In fact, I didn't see a clear difference of intrusion and penetration into a system. And try to find the weakness patterns and the suspicious behavior, compare audit records and state against these rules. Mostly these rules, they are specific to applications and specific to operating systems and even specific to hardware. So then it's important to develop a comprehensive set of different rules. Now we can move on to this host-based IDS. It's a kind of a summary of what way this approach we have introduced. So it uses the operating system that's by default to, it has some auditing mechanism to record system call trace and also to log some different events generated by processes or generated by users. Then it monitors the user activities, and these activities can be monitored by like some command, or like in Windows you have this task manager. In the command you have in Unix or Linux you have this PID. Then you have PS process, and you can see all the activities that are active in the time. No, so here we have kind of introduced this general idea of intrusion detection. And we mentioned in the end, it will give you a report or indicator of some behaviors. We need to discuss about the accuracy of this IDS report. And in the assumption, the IDS assume that the behavior of normal users and malicious users can be distinguishable. But still also, they have overlap behavior. And for IDS system, in general, this, let me see. It will sometimes give out some false report. This report, there are two types of false. One is false negative. The other one is a false positive. By false negative, as you can guess from its name, so it examines some behavior, and then it reports this behavior is not an intrusion, but in fact it is an intrusion. So then that's the false negative. Another one is a false positive. So it reports this intrusion, but here I should make it clear, this negative and the positive. If the result, the negative refers to the intrusion, the behavior is an intrusion or not. If it is an intrusion, then we can say it's a positive. And if it's not an, if the output says, okay, it's not an intrusion, we say it's a negative. But it can be totally reversed. We just, okay, look at some behavior and give a intrusion is a negative because that's negative to the system, and the positive, like normal behavior, is positive because it's positive to the system. So you might get confused about this, the result, what it means. But let's just stick to the first interpretation. So if it reports negative, then it means it's not an intrusion. If it reports a positive, it means it's an intrusion. But in general, we want to design an IDS to have as little false alarms as possible, right? And here, it's also taken from the textbook. You have these two curves that cover the left one. It's the profile of intruder behavior. The right one is the profile of legitimate user behavior. And when we design these two, for most models, we prefer to have these two curves, they apart from each other as much as possible to reduce this gray area, that overlapped area, as little as possible. Because in this case, the accuracy of the report will be much better. But unfortunately, it's not possible. And so different models, they have different values or different metric of this area. Also, for some of the models or the approaches, it involves heavier computation. So it's less effective, but it has a better it has a much smaller false alarm reports. But for some of the intrusion detection systems, it's much faster. It's very convenient to use. It introduces a rather low computation overhead, but unfortunately, they will have more false report than the first case. And for most of this intrusion detection, the general goal, of course, is to have high rate of detection and low rate of false alarm, right? And why we need to have high rate? Well, detection, but because if it's high, it indicates it's a low level of, if it's a low rate, it indicates it's a rather low level for security protection. Or it may lead to this false sense of security protection. Because they say, okay, everything is fine, or like there's only a few intrusion behavior, but in reality, there's much more than that. And that gives the administrator or the system that a false sense of security protection. This low rate of false alarm, if it's a high, like many this false alarm that, okay, your system, they have this intrusion. And if it pops up every second minute, every 5 minutes, even the system administrators will ignore this type of alarm. It's too much. They cannot handle this. So they just ignore and they maybe deactivate the system. And also if they are rather conservative and they spend a lot of time to analyze, to investigate that behavior, but in the end, it turned out it's normal behavior. Then it's a typical waste of resource, or human resource and time in this analysis process. In practice, again, unfortunately, this kind of goal, it's called this base rate fallacy. This goal, in theory, this kind of goal cannot be well achieved, and this claim is based on some analysis and calculations of probabilistic model to show that this type of goal cannot be well achieved. Like we cannot have very high rate of detection and a very low rate of false alarm. And in the last one, this distributed intrusion detection, or like in this case, it's in the, as I mentioned, it's not just in a single system. It's deployed and placed in many systems, and this system will send reports, send data to the analysis from different ports, and the central analyzer will get better overview of all this data, and then hopefully it will give out a better and more accurate report of this behavior on the data. That's the idea. Since I see the time is already out, we can stop here. The summary is like basically what we have learned. But in general, this intrusion detection system, most of these systems are commercial products. So I don't have access to show you how it works. But with this advanced intrusion detection environment, that's open source. It's basically for integrity check. And I'm not sure whether I should have a demo for it or I directly lead you to some video, then you can see how it works. Okay, yeah, that's it. Have a nice weekend.